I need to first create a detailed outline for this new story before writing it. Let me develop the 8-part structure for My Dad Waited for Mom's Last Breath to Throw Me Out. The 33 MO surprise she left changed everything. Opening. My name is Grace, 28 years old, and I was holding my mother's hand when she took her last breath at 3:47 a.m. The moment. Father immediately telling her to pack her things and leave. Emotional shock. Still in hospital room, mother's body still warm. Foreshadowing. Mother's whispered final words about the safety deposit box. Call to action. Before I tell you how my mother destroyed my father from beyond the grave, let me know where you're watching from. Please like and subscribe if you've ever been betrayed by someone who should have protected you. Scene 1, Early Childhood Memories. 400 words. Grace at 7, Mother Eleanor, teaching her piano while Father Richard criticised Father's affairs starting when Grace was 10. Mother's quiet acceptance focusing love on Grace. Father's resentment of their closeness. Scene 2, The Illness Begins. 500 words. Mother diagnosed with cancer when Grace was 23. Father immediately discussing selling house for treatment costs. Grace quitting her job to become caregiver. Discovering father moving assets preparing for mother's death. Mother starting secret meetings with lawyers. Scene 3, 5 years of deterioration. 500 words. Father bringing Mistress Diane to house while mother upstairs. Grace confronting him. Being threatened with homelessness. Mother getting weaker but sharper about finances. Secret conversations with mother about preparations. Father preventing Grace from accessing mother's accounts. Scene 1, The Acceleration. 450 words. Mother entering hospice care at home. Father limiting Grace's time with mother. Diane measuring rooms for redecoration. Mother giving Grace cryptic instructions about specific dates. Father intercepting mail and calls. Scene 2, The Revelations. 500 words. Grace discovering father had been stealing from mother's medical fund. Learning about 3 mortgages on family home. Mother's best friend Patricia secretly visiting. Patricia revealing mother had been investigating for years. Mother's strength despite physical weakness. Scene 3, The Last Week. 450 words. Father bringing lawyers to get power of attorney. Mother refusing to sign anything. Grace sleeping on floor beside mother's bed. Mother's final, coherent conversation about the plan. The safety deposit box key hidden in Grace's childhood teddy bear. Scene 1, The Final Night. 400 words. Grace holding vigil alone. Father at Diane's house. Mother's last words about justice and patience. The moment of passing at 3:47 a.m. Father arriving at 6 a.m. with moving boxes. You have 2 hours to pack and leave. Scene 2, The Cruelty. 500 words. Father refusing to let Grace attend funeral arrangements. Diane arriving to claim mother's jewelry. Grace packing 28 years into 3 suitcases. Finding the teddy bear with the key. Being escorted out by father's lawyer. Scene 3, The Funeral. 500 words. Grace attending, despite father's ban. Father's hypocritical eulogy about devoted marriage. Diane sitting in family section. Patricia approaching Grace with business card. Instructions to visit specific bank on specific date. Scene 1, The Safety Deposit Box. 400 words. 3 days after funeral. Visiting the bank. Multiple boxes in mother's maiden name. First box 33 million in bearer bonds. Second box property, deeds to buildings father didn't know about. Third box complete evidence file of father's crimes. Scene 2, The Letter. 500 words. Mother's 20-page letter explaining everything. 15 years of planning and investing. Inheritance from grandmother father never knew about. Building real estate empire while pretending to be housewife. Detailed instructions for destroying father. Scene 3, The Evidence. 500 words. Photos and documents of father's embezzlement from his company. Proof of tax evasion spanning decades. Records of affairs with financial implications. Forged signatures on loan documents. Everything needed for criminal prosecution. Scene 1, The Lawyer. 400 words. Meeting with mother's secret attorney James Harrison. Learning mother had been CEO of Shell Company. Grace now inherited everything. Protected from father. Father had signed away rights thinking they were medical forms. The prenuptial agreement he forgot about. Scene 2, The Foreclosure. 500 words. Father receiving foreclosure notice on family home. Mother owned the mortgage company. Grace now controlling his debts. Diane discovering father is broke. Father calling Grace. begging for help. Scene 3, the revelation, 500 words. Grace arriving at father's office, revealing she owns the building, his company lease terminated for violations, IRS agents arriving with Patricia, father realizing the depth of mother's revenge. Scene 1, the public downfall, 450 words. News breaking about father's embezzlement, Diane leaving him immediately, company board firing him, criminal charges filed, Grace watching from her new penthouse. Scene 2, the confrontation, 450 words. Father appearing at Grace's building, security turning him away, final phone call where he blames everyone but himself, Grace reading mother's words about forgiveness, choosing justice over reconciliation. Scene 3, the trial, 500 words. Grace testifying with mother's evidence, father's lawyer arguing emotional manipulation, judge reviewing decades of documentation, guilty verdict on all counts, 15-year sentence. Scene 1, the rebuilding 400 words. Grace taking over mother's real estate empire, establishing Eleanor Foundation for cancer patients, Patricia becoming trusted advisor, using wealth to help women escape abusive situations. Scene 2, understanding mother 500 words. Finding mother's journals from healthy years, learning about mother's own abusive childhood, how she built strength through suffering, her decision to stay for Grace's protection, the meticulous planning of revenge through love. Scene 3, the lesson, 500 words. Visiting father in prison once, his inability to accept responsibility, Grace's peace with the outcome, mother's grave with fresh flowers, final reflection on patient justice, message about how abusers often underestimate their victims, the power of strategic thinking over emotional reaction. Now I'll write the full story. My name is Grace, 28 years old, and I was holding my mother's hand when she took her last breath at 3:47 a.m. The monitors went silent. Her fingers relaxed in mine, and before her body had even cooled, my father walked into the hospital room with cardboard boxes. "Pack your things and get out of my house," he said, not even looking at the bed where my mother lay. "You have 2 hours." I was still wearing the same clothes from yesterday, my mother's final words about a safety deposit box echoing in my mind. Before I tell you how my mother destroyed my father from beyond the grave, let me know where you're watching from. Please like and subscribe if you've ever been betrayed by someone who should have protected you, because this story will show you that sometimes the quietest people plan the loudest revenge. My earliest memory of my father Richard isn't of love or protection, but of criticism. I was 7 years old, sitting at our piano, while my mother Eleanor taught me to play Moonlight Sonata. My fingers were too small to reach all the keys properly, but mother was patient, guiding my hands, gently praising every correct note. Then father's voice cut through our lesson like a blade. "That's not music, that's noise. Why are you wasting time teaching her something she'll never be good at?" Mother's hand tightened on my shoulder for just a moment, then relaxed. She smiled at me, that special smile she reserved for moments when father was being cruel, and whispered that we would continue our lesson later. I didn't understand then why she never fought back, why she accepted his harsh words like they were weather something to endure rather than challenge. It would take me 20 years to understand she wasn't being weak. She was being strategic. The affair started when I was 10, or at least that's when I became aware of them. Father would come home smelling of perfume that wasn't mother's, with receipts in his pockets for restaurants mother never went to. He didn't even try to hide it after a while, taking calls from women in front of us, leaving for weekend business trips that required no luggage. Mother would simply continue cooking dinner, helping me with homework, tending her garden, as if our family wasn't fracturing with every betrayal. I asked her once when I was 13, and full of righteous anger on her behalf, why she didn't leave him. She was braiding my hair for school, her fingers gentle and sure, and she paused for a long moment before answering. "Sometimes, Grace," she said, "the best revenge isn't leaving. It's staying and building something they can't see coming." I didn't understand what she meant then. I thought she was making excuses for staying with a man who treated her like furniture. I wouldn't understand her words until I opened that safety deposit box 15 years later. Father's resentment of my closeness with mother grew with each passing year. He saw our bond as a personal affront, a daily reminder that someone in the house loved her more than they feared him. He would schedule business dinners on my birthday, important meetings, during my school plays, anything to prevent mother from attending events that mattered to me. but she always found a way to be there, sometimes arriving late with flour still in her hair from rushing from his demanded dinner preparations, but she was there. The diagnosis came when I was 23, fresh out of college, with a degree in accounting and a job offer from a prestigious firm. Pancreatic cancer stage 3, the doctor said with practiced sympathy. 6 months to a year with treatment, maybe 2 if we were lucky. I remember Father's first words weren't about Mother's health or comfort, but about the cost. How much will this drain from our assets, he asked the oncologist, as if Mother's life was a line item on a budget he was reluctant to approve. That night, while Father was on the phone with his insurance company trying to minimize coverage, Mother called me into her room. She was 48 years old, but looked ancient. In that moment, not from the cancer, but from decades of emotional exhaustion. I need you to quit your job and come home, she said. Not to take care of me, though. I'll need that too, but to witness what's about to happen. I need someone I trust to see everything. I moved back home the next week, giving up my apartment in the city, my new job, my independence. Father was furious at first, saying he didn't need another mouth to feed while dealing with medical bills. But when he realized I would be providing free nursing care, saving him the cost of hiring someone, his tone changed. You can stay in your old room, he conceded, but you'll earn your keep. You'll handle all her care. I don't want to deal with the messy parts of this disease. What Father didn't know was that Mother had already started meeting with lawyers. While he was at work believing she was at chemotherapy, she was actually in law offices downtown, reviewing documents, signing papers, setting wheels in motion that wouldn't stop turning until long after her heart did. She would come home exhausted, let me help her into bed, then smile that same strategic smile from my childhood. He thinks I'm getting weaker, she would say, but I'm actually getting everything ready. Father began moving assets almost immediately after the diagnosis. I watched him transfer money from joint accounts into accounts only he could access, sell stocks that were in both their names, even attempt to refinance the house to pull out equity. He did all this while Mother was supposedly sleeping, but she was watching everything, documenting every transaction on a laptop he didn't know she had, hidden in the false bottom of her jewelry box. The 5 years of her illness were a masterclass in cruelty and patience. Father's cruelty escalated as Mother's body weakened. He brought his mistress Diane to our house while Mother was upstairs too sick to come down. I confronted him once, shaking with rage, as I heard Diane's laughter from the living room while Mother vomited from chemo upstairs. He grabbed my wrist hard enough to leave bruises and said if I ever embarrassed him again, I would be homeless before Mother's body was cold. The threat was clear. Stay silent or lose my chance to be with Mother in her final days. The final months were when Father's true nature became undeniable. Mother had entered home hospice care, confined to the bedroom she had shared with Father for 30 years, though he now slept in the guest room when he came home at all. He limited my time with her, claiming the nurses needed space to work, but really he was trying to prevent her from telling me something. What he didn't know was that Mother had already told me everything that mattered in small doses and whispers during the brief moments we were alone. Diane started coming to the house openly, measuring rooms for renovation, while Mother could hear her from the bed. I want to knock out this wall, she said loudly, standing in the hallway outside Mother's room. Make the master suite bigger. Maybe turn the sick room into a walk-in closet. The casual cruelty of discussing Mother's bedroom as if she were already gone, while she could hear every word, was breathtaking. Mother just squeezed my hand and whispered that Diane would never live in this house. I thought it was wishful thinking. I was wrong. Father started bringing lawyers to the house, trying to get Mother to sign power of attorney forms. She was on morphine for the pain, drifting in and out of consciousness, and he would wait for her most vulnerable moments to put papers in front of her. Sign here, Eleanor, he would say, his voice suddenly gentle. Just medical forms, nothing to worry about. But Mother, even in her fog, would push the papers away. She hadn't survived 5 years of cancer to give up control in the final innings. Patricia, Mother's best friend from college, started visiting secretly when Father was at work. She would arrive looking like a hospice volunteer, wearing scrubs and carrying medical supplies. But she was really bringing documents for Mother to sign, papers that required witnesses, plans that needed final approval. I would stand guard at the window, watching for Father's car, while Patricia and Mother conducted business in whispers. Your mother is the strongest woman I've ever known, Patricia told me once. What she's doing takes more courage than you can imagine. During the last week, Mother's coherent moments became rare and precious. She would wake suddenly clear-eyed and urgent, give me specific instructions, then drift back into the morphine haze. The key is in Mr. Buttons, she said once, referring to my childhood teddy bear that still sat on my old bookshelf. February 15th, 3 days after the funeral, go to First National on Maple Street. Box 4739. Remember those numbers, Grace? Everything changes with those numbers. Father intercepted all the mail, redirecting Mother's correspondence to a P.O. box only he could access. He disconnected the landline in her room, claiming the ringing disturbed her rest. He told the nurses I was emotionally unstable, grieving prematurely, and they should limit my access to prevent upset. But every night after he left for Diane's apartment, I would slip into Mother's room and sleep on the floor beside her bed, holding her hand through the rails, feeling her pulse grow weaker, but her resolve remained steady. 3 nights before she died, Mother woke at 2 a.m. with perfect clarity. She pulled me close, her voice stronger than it had been in weeks. "I've spent 20 years planning this," she whispered. "Every insult, every affair, every cruelty, I documented it all. I built something beautiful while he was busy destroying us. When I'm gone, he'll think he's won. Let him think that. Count to 3 days after the funeral, then go to the bank. And Grace, remember that revenge is a dish best served with legal documentation." The night she died, Father wasn't home. He was at Diane's apartment, had been there for 2 days, leaving me alone with Mother and the night nurse. At 3 a.m., the nurse took a break, and it was just Mother and me. Her breathing was laboured, rattling in her chest like stones in a jar. She opened her eyes one last time, looked directly at me with perfect clarity and said, "I love you, Grace. Everything I built was for you. Let him throw you out. It's part of the plan." Then she squeezed my hand 3 times, our secret signal from my childhood that meant I love you. And at 3:47 a.m., she let go. I sat with her for 2 hours, holding her still warm hand, memorizing her face, saying goodbye to the only person who had ever truly loved me. The sunrise was just beginning to colour the windows when I heard Father's car in the driveway. He walked into the room at 6 a.m., saw Mother's still form, and his first words weren't of grief or loss. His first words were, "Finally." Then he turned to me and said, "You have 2 hours to pack your things and get out of my house." I was still in my pajamas, Mother's hand still warm in mine, when Father returned with cardboard boxes from the garage. "Start packing," he said, checking his watch. "Diane will be here at 8 to start planning renovations. I want you gone before then." The casual cruelty of it, the fact that he had boxes ready, that he had already scheduled his mistress to arrive, told me everything I needed to know about how long he had been planning this moment. I packed 28 years of life into 3 suitcases, while Father stood in my doorway, supervising, making sure I didn't take anything he considered valuable. The family photos of Mother and me were acceptable. The jewelry Mother had given me for graduations and birthdays was not. "That belongs to the estate," he said, taking my grandmother's pearl necklace from my hands. "You're not family anymore. You were only ever here because Eleanor insisted, and Eleanor is gone." While packing my childhood things, I found Mr. Buttons, my teddy bear, sitting on the bookshelf where he had been for 15 years. Father laughed when I picked him up. 28 years old and still carrying around stuffed animals, he sneered. "No wonder you never amounted to anything." I hugged the bear tighter, feeling the small hard shape of the key sewn into his belly, and said nothing. Let him think I was pathetic. Mother had taught me that being underestimated was a weapon if you knew how to use it. Diane arrived early at 7:30, dressed like she was going to a country club brunch, rather than entering a house where a woman had died 5 hours ago. She walked past me like I was invisible, already discussing with Father which walls to tear down, which rooms to combine, how to erase every trace of Eleanor Morrison from the house she had made a home for 3 decades. I heard her say the smell of sickness would be hard to get out. They would need to replace all the carpets, possibly the drywall too. Father had called his lawyer, who arrived to supervise my eviction, making sure I didn't take anything that could be considered marital property. The man actually checked my suitcases, pouring through my clothes and personal items like I was a criminal. When he found Mother's cookbook, the one she had handwritten with all our family recipes, he confiscated it. This could be considered an asset, he said, adding it to a box of items to be catalogued for the estate. I wasn't allowed to say goodbye to Mother's body. The funeral home had already come while I was packing, taking her away, while I folded clothes and tried not to scream. Father informed me that the funeral would be family only, and since I was no longer family, my presence would not be welcome. "If you show up," he said, "I'll have you arrested for trespassing. The will clearly states that everything goes to the surviving spouse. You get nothing, you are nothing." Patricia was waiting outside in her car. She had been there all morning, Father hadn't noticed, and she followed the lawyer's car as he escorted me off the property like a criminal. Once we were around the corner, she pulled over and held me while I sobbed, not from grief for my mother, who I knew was finally free, but from rage at the man who had stolen even my right to mourn. He has no idea what's coming, Patricia said, stroking my hair. Your mother made sure of that. The funeral was 3 days later. I attended despite Father's ban, sitting in the back row of the church wearing dark sunglasses and my mother's old coat that still smelled like her perfume. Father delivered a eulogy that would have been beautiful if it hadn't been fiction, talking about their devoted marriage, their partnership, how he had nursed her through her illness with dedication. Diane sat in the front row in the seat that should have been mine, wearing a black dress that was too tight and shoes that were too red for a funeral. When the service ended, I stayed seated while the church emptied, watching Father accept condolences with practiced sorrow. Patricia approached me quietly, slipping a business card into my hand. First National Bank Maple Street branch, she whispered. February 15th, 9 a.m. James Harrison will be waiting for you. He has instructions from your mother. Then she squeezed my shoulder and disappeared into the crowd of mourners. I spent the 3 days between the funeral and February 15th in a cheap motel, counting the hours, holding Mr. Buttons and feeling the key through his fabric belly. I didn't sleep, couldn't eat, just waited for the moment Mother had planned. Father called once not to check on me, but to inform me that if I contested the will, he would bury me in legal fees. I didn't respond. There was no point. The will he was talking about wasn't the only will that existed. February 15th arrived grey and cold, fitting weather for what was about to unfold. I walked into First National Bank at exactly 9 a.m. Mr. Yes. Buttons in my purse with the key now removed from his belly and clutched in my sweaty palm. A man in an expensive suit was waiting in the lobby. Miss Morrison, he said, extending his hand. I'm James Harrison. Your mother spoke of you often. Please follow me. He led me to a private room in the basement where safety deposit boxes lined the walls like steel tombstones. Your mother maintained several boxes here under her maiden name, Eleanor Fitzgerald, he explained, pulling out a ring of keys. She paid for them 20 years in advance and left very specific instructions about when they could be opened. We'll start with box 4739. The first box was larger than I expected, and when James opened it, I had to sit down. Stacks of bearer bonds, each worth $100,000, filled the entire space. $3.3 million in this box alone, James said quietly. Completely untraceable, completely legal, completely yours. Your mother began purchasing these when you were 8 years old, small amounts at first, then larger as her investment strategies succeeded. The second box contained property deeds. 14 commercial buildings in downtown, purchased under a shell company called Phoenix Holdings. Your mother was quite the real estate investor, James said, laying out the deeds like playing cards. These properties generate approximately $400,000 in monthly rental income. The management company has been handling everything waiting for you to claim ownership. Your father's office, ironically, is in one of these buildings. He's been paying rent to your mother for 15 years without knowing it. The third box was smaller, but devastating in its contents. Photos of father with various women dating back 20 years. Bank statements showing embezzlement from his company transfers that coincided with his affairs. Tax documents that had been falsified, returns that didn't match the actual income. And at the bottom, a USB drive labeled, "For Grace with Love." This contained everything needed to destroy Richard Morrison legally and completely. But it was the fourth box that broke me. It contained a single envelope, thick with pages of mother's handwriting. My dearest Grace, it began. If you're reading this, then my plan worked, and you're finally free. Let me explain everything from the beginning so you understand that none of this was accident or luck. This was revenge served at exactly the right temperature with all the proper documentation. Mother's letter explained that she had inherited money from her grandmother when I was 7, $2 million that she never told father about. She knew even then that he would waste it, spend it on his affairs and his ego. So she created a separate identity, opened accounts he never knew existed, and began investing. She studied the markets at the library while he thought she was at book club. She built a real estate empire while he believed she was at charity lunches. For 15 years, she wrote, I watched him steal from our joint accounts, thinking he was so clever while I was building something he could never touch. Every affair he had, I documented. Every crime he committed, I recorded. Every cruel word he said to you, I wrote down with the date and time. I stayed not because I was weak, but because leaving would have meant sharing assets. Now he gets nothing, and you get everything, including the satisfaction of destroying him. The letter detailed every step of her plan. How she had tricked father into signing documents he thought were medical forms, but were actually legal agreements, giving her sole ownership of assets he didn't know existed. how she had hired forensic accountants to trace his embezzlement, how she had placed Patricia on the board of his company to gather information, how she had orchestrated everything so that 3 days after her funeral, Father would discover he owned nothing but debt. At the bottom of the letter was a single line that made me laugh through my tears. The best part, Grace, is that he evicted you from a house he doesn't actually own. Checkbox number 5. I did, and inside was the deed to our family home transferred to my name 2 years ago through a trust Father had unknowingly signed. He had been living in my house planning renovations to my property, all while thinking he was king of his castle. James Harrison, who had been silent while I read, finally spoke. Your mother was my client for 20 years, he said. She was brilliant, methodical, and patient. Everything is legal. Everything is documented. Everything is yours. The total value of the estate she left you is approximately $33 million in assets, not including the ongoing income from the properties. Your father, on the other hand, is about to discover he owns nothing but the clothes on his back, and approximately $2 million in hidden debt your mother carefully documented. The trap Mother had set was elegant in its complexity. Father received the first notice 3 days after I visited the bank, a foreclosure warning on the family home. He called the mortgage company furiously, only to discover that Phoenix Holdings owned the mortgage, and Phoenix Holdings was now under my control. The house he had lived in for 25 years, the house he had thrown me out of, was mine. He had 30 days to vacate or face legal eviction. Diane left him within hours of learning he didn't own the house. She had been measuring for renovations in a property that belonged to the stepdaughter she had dismissed. The engagement ring she had been flashing around town was suddenly worth more than Father's entire net worth. She packed her bags and disappeared, probably in search of another wealthy widower who actually owned his assets. Father called me for the first time since Mother's death, his voice cycling between rage and desperation. You can't do this, he screamed. That house is mine. I paid for it. I maintained it. Your mother is dead and dead. Women can't own property. I let him rant. Then calmly explained that Mother had transferred the house to me 2 years ago, completely legally, with his signature on the documents. He had been so eager to sign anything that might speed up her death that he never read what he was signing. The next blow came when he arrived at his office to find an eviction notice. Phoenix Holdings owned that building too, and his lease was being terminated for multiple violations, including using the office for illegal activities that Mother had documented. The forensic accountants she had hired had found evidence of embezzlement going back 15 years, all traced to that office. He had 24 hours to remove his belongings before the locks were changed. But Mother's revenge wasn't just about taking away his assets. It was about exposing his crimes. Patricia, who had been quietly serving on his company's board, called an emergency meeting. She presented the evidence Mother had gathered showing years of embezzlement, fraud, and tax evasion. The board had no choice but to fire him immediately and report the crimes to the authorities. By the end of the week, Father was under federal investigation. The IRS arrived at his empty office with Patricia as their guide. Mother had provided them with 20 years of falsified tax returns, evidence of hidden offshore accounts, and documentation of unreported income. The penalties and back taxes alone would have bankrupted him even if he had kept the house. But now, with no assets and mounting legal fees, he was destroyed. The man who had spent 30 years believing he was untouchable was learning that Mother had been keeping score all along. I met him once during this collapse at a coffee shop downtown. He looked like he had aged 10 years. In 2 weeks, his expensive suit wrinkled, his hands shaking. How could she do this to me? He asked, genuine bewilderment in his voice. We were married for 30 years. I gave her everything. The delusion was breathtaking. You gave her nothing but pain, I said. She gave you 30 years to change, to be better, to love us. You chose cruelty instead. This isn't what she did to you. This is what you earned. He tried to blame everyone but himself. Mother was vindictive. Patricia was a spy. I was ungrateful. The lawyers were conspirators. Everyone was wrong except him. Even facing federal prison, he couldn't admit that his actions had consequences. Mother had predicted this in her letter. He will never understand that this was justice, not revenge, she wrote. He will die believing he was the victim. That's his real prison, the one he built himself. The public downfall was swift and merciless. The local newspaper ran the story on the front page. Prominent businessman charged with embezzlement and tax evasion. The article detailed Father's crimes, but also mentioned that his wife had posthumously exposed them, having gathered evidence during her 5-year battle with cancer. The reporter called Mother a hero who protected her employees even while dying. Father was painted as a monster who had betrayed not just his family, but everyone who trusted him. His country club revoked his membership. His business partners distanced themselves. The society friends who had attended Mother's funeral now pretended they had never known him. Diane gave an interview claiming she had been deceived, that she had no idea about his criminal activities, that she was just another victim. The woman who had been ready to renovate my mother's deathbed into a closet was now claiming sympathy she didn't deserve. The trial began 6 months after Mother's death. I testified, presenting the evidence Mother had gathered, reading portions of her letter that documented Father's abuse and neglect. The prosecutor used Mother's meticulous records to build an airtight case. Every receipt, every bank statement, every email had been preserved and organised. Mother had built a case that any first-year law student could have won. Father's defense attorney tried to argue that Mother had manipulated everything, that she had been vindictive and possibly mentally compromised from her medication. But the evidence predated her illness by years. The planning had begun when she was healthy, clear-minded, and tired of being victimized. The jury saw through the desperate defense immediately. They deliberated for less than 3 hours before returning guilty verdicts on all counts. The sentencing was almost anticlimactic. 15 years in federal prison, no possibility of early release. All assets seized to pay restitution and fines. Father stood as the judge read the sentence, his face finally showing the reality of his situation. He looked at me once, searching for something, maybe mercy or forgiveness or recognition that he had once been my father. I gave him nothing. Mother had taught me that some people don't deserve forgiveness, they deserve consequences. As they led him away in handcuffs, he tried one more manipulation. "Tell them I loved her," he called out to me. "Tell them I loved your mother." I almost laughed. The last lie of a man who had never told the truth. I didn't respond. There was nothing left to say. Mother had said everything necessary through her carefully planned justice. The man who had waited for her last breath to throw me out was now learning what it really meant to lose everything. The first thing I did with Mother's money was establish the Eleanor Foundation, a non-profit dedicated to helping women with cancer who were also dealing with domestic abuse. The foundation provided not just medical support, but legal assistance, helping women protect their assets and plan for their children's futures while fighting illness. Within the first year, we helped 300 women escape situations like Mother's, except they got to live to see their freedom. Patricia became my closest advisor and eventually the godmother I never had. She told me stories about Mother in college, brilliant and ambitious, before Father had convinced her to give up her career for marriage. She showed me photos of Mother young and hopeful, planning to become a lawyer to change the world. She did change the world, Patricia said, just not the way she originally planned. She changed it through you, through this foundation, through proving that patience and planning can defeat cruelty and arrogance. I hired Maria, our former housekeeper, who Father had fired for being too sympathetic to Mother, to manage the foundation's daily operations. She cried when I offered her the position, saying Mother would be so proud. "Your mother saw you," Maria said. "Even when you thought you were invisible, she saw everything. She knew you would honor her memory, not through grief, but through action. That's why she gave you the tools for both justice and healing." I kept the family home, but transformed it. The room where Mother died became a library filled with books about women who changed history. The kitchen, where she cooked thousands of meals while planning her revenge, became a meeting space for women escaping abuse. The garden she tended even while sick bloomed with new life, tended by survivors who found peace in nurturing something beautiful. Every corner that had witnessed pain now served healing. I found Mother's journals while renovating, hidden in the attic inside boxes labeled Christmas Decorations, 1995 through 2000. 20 years of thoughts, plans, observations, and love letters to me that she never sent. Reading them was like having conversations with her ghost, understanding finally that every moment of apparent weakness had been calculated strength. Every silence had been strategic patience. One entry dated the day after my 16th birthday particularly struck me. "Grace asked me again today why I don't leave Richard," she had written. "How do I explain that leaving would mean sharing assets, would mean he gets half of what I'm building for her? How do I tell her that staying is the only way to ensure she gets everything? That his cruelty is the price I pay for her future freedom? Someday she'll understand that love sometimes means playing the long game." The real estate empire Mother built generated enough income that I never had to work, but I did anyway. I got my CPA license and specialized in helping women hide assets from abusive partners, teaching them the techniques Mother had perfected. Every client reminded me that Mother's revenge wasn't just personal, it was instructional. She had created a template for freedom that could be replicated, adapted, and shared. 6 months into father's sentence, I visited him once. He had aged 20 years in 6 months, his hair completely grey, his hands shaking with the tremors of someone broken. He didn't recognize me at first. Then his eyes widened with something between hope and fear. "Have you come to forgive me?" he asked, his voice small and desperate. "No," I said simply. "I came to tell you that Mum's favourite flowers were yellow roses, not red ones. You brought red roses to her funeral. Even in death, you didn't know her." He tried to justify himself one more time, saying Mother had been cold, calculating that she had planned his destruction while pretending to love him. The projection was perfect in its blindness. "You're describing yourself," I told him. "Mum was warm and loving and kind. She just wasn't any of those things to you after you proved you didn't deserve them. She gave you 20 years to be better. You chose to be worse. This isn't her fault. It's her victory." The yellow roses I place on Mother's grave every week have become a symbol for the women helped by the foundation. They represent strength, disguised as fragility, patience, that looks like acceptance and revenge served with such precision that the victim thinks they're winning until the moment they've lost everything. Mother's headstone reads, "Beloved Mother, Secret Warrior," a title she earned through 30 years of strategic suffering. The final entry in Mother's journal, written the day before she died, was addressed to me. "Grace, if you're reading this, then everything worked according to plan. Know that every moment of pain was worth it to ensure your freedom. Richard thinks he won because I died first, but death was just my final move. From beyond the grave, I've given you everything he thought was his. Use it wisely. Help other women escape. Show them that sometimes the best revenge is patient, legal, and devastating. I love you forever, Mom." I had the letter framed and hung in my office at the foundation, where women come seeking help, often with the same bruises Mother used to hide with makeup. I tell them Mother's story, show them the newspaper clippings of Father's downfall, prove that abusers can be destroyed with patience and planning. Some cry, some laugh, but all leave with something they didn't have before. Hope. And phone numbers for lawyers who specialize in hidden assets. Mother had spent her final years in physical agony while orchestrating a revenge so complete that it would echo through generations. She turned victimhood into victory abuse, into ammunition, and death into the ultimate triumph. Father had waited for her last breath to throw me out, thinking her death meant his freedom. Instead, her last breath was the trigger for his complete destruction. The $33 million surprise she left me wasn't just money. It was proof that love is stronger than cruelty, that patience defeats arrogance, and that sometimes the quietest women are planning the loudest revenge. Looking back, I understand that Mother didn't stay with Father despite his abuse. She stayed because of it. Every cruel word, every affair, every humiliation was evidence she collected ammunition. She stored power, she accumulated for the day she wouldn't be there to protect me anymore. She knew that leaving would mean splitting assets, would mean Father retained power, would mean I remained vulnerable. So she stayed, she suffered, she planned, and she won. The women who come to the foundation often ask if I'm angry that Mother didn't leave, didn't save herself. I tell them that she did save herself, just not in the way we expected. She saved herself by saving me, by destroying him, by building something beautiful from something ugly. Her body died at 3:47 a.m. on February 12th, but her spirit lives in every woman who refuses to be a victim, who plans their escape, who understands that revenge is a dish best served with legal documentation. Have you ever been underestimated by someone who should have protected you? Have you watched someone you love suffer while planning their escape? Share your story in the comments below. Like this video if you believe in justice, subscribe for more stories of triumph over abuse, and share this with anyone who needs to know that patience and planning can overcome cruelty and control. Remember that the quietest victims often become the most powerful victors. Thank you for watching, and to everyone fighting their own battles against abuse, know that you're not alone. Your mother's spirit, like Eleanor's, lives in everyone who refuses to let cruelty win. Build your evidence, make your plan, and when the time is right, serve your revenge at exactly the right temperature with all the proper documentation.